Good morning. Our scripture reading is from Mark's Gospel, the 4th chapter, beginning with the 35th verse, telling the story about Jesus in the boat on the water. Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the east side." So they left the crowd and his disciples and started across the lake with him in the boat. Some other boats followed along with them. Suddenly, a windstorm struck the lake. Waves started splashing into the boat, and it was about to sink. Jesus was in the back of the boat with his head on a pillow, and he was asleep. His disciples woke him and said, "Teacher, don't you care that we're about to drown?" And Jesus got up and ordered the wind and the waves to be quiet. And the wind stopped, and everything was calm. And Jesus asked his disciples, "Why were you afraid? Don't you have any faith?" Now they were more afraid than ever and said to each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Friends, listen. God is still speaking, and we are still listening. If you're like me, when you encounter something frightening, you get scared. And when you get scared, you sometimes yell to cover it up. "What do you mean? I got a letter from the IRS. I did nothing wrong. Who do they think they are? God?" A matter for careful theological debate some other time. But anyway, things sometimes frighten me. For example, every week at master choir rehearsal, I'm scared the next concert will fall flat on its face. Every week I fear Tampa Tribune critics' review of our next concert. Last night at the Riley Center, we witnessed one of the more bizarre incidents in music history. Dr. Harold McSwain conducted the Central Florida Master Choir in record time in a performance of Brahms' German Requiem, Beethoven's Christ on the Mount of Olives, and Bernstein's Chichester Psalms. We mention record time because all three pieces were performed simultaneously, and nobody, McSwain least of all, seemed to notice. With no need for an intermission, we delighted in getting up and going home. Driving scares the liver out of me. Who enjoys the joy of the open road anymore? Nobody. That's who. What people enjoy is getting where they're going alive. As for Myth of the Open Road, Thelma and Louise in a convertible Thunderbird, Hair in the Wind, gone. This from the Tampa Tribune headlines. Tragedy struck just off State Road 200 yesterday. Dr. Harold McSwain, recently fired from the Central Florida Master Choir, drove his Honda truck onto the northbound ramp towards Gainesville, which on first reading may not seem so bad, except that only moments before he had been in the southbound ramp and was struck from behind by accompanist Galen Capitano. and McSwain launched over the edge and landed nose down on the northbound ramp. Witnesses reported that Capitano screamed from above on the southbound ramp, "Death to tyrants!" McSwain may have sustained serious injuries. Paramedics reported that McSwain was pulled from the wreckage, singing Jim Neighbors' classic hits, "Help Me Make It Through the Night" and "Kiss Me Goodbye." Driving scares me. I yell. Same with the disciples in the boat. Scared. So they yelled. In the boat crossing the lake, a storm comes up, waves crashing over the sides. They begin foundering and began doing what any red-blooded individual would do. They yelled. "Don't you care? There you are, back of the boat, dead asleep. We're up here, front of the boat. Stroke, 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 bail, bail, bail. What is the matter with you?" Who wouldn't yell? Well, on first blush, this is a silly story if taken as an historical narrative, but it's a story. Not historical narrative, though not suggesting that it's true, not true, just because it's a story. It just means facts aren't the point. Look, so they took a boat trip during a storm, and the storm calmed down. Fine. Is that all there is? Nope. The storm on the water story is a setup aimed towards an underlying truth. So, what is the story about? Well, back when Mark wrote his gospel, the boat symbolized the church. Still does. Enter any great cathedral in Europe and observe that the ceiling has the same shape, upside down, as the hull of a boat. You ever wonder why the main room of a cathedral is called the nave? Navy? Get the connection? Over the doorway leading into the nave, oftentimes a painting or a sculpture of a boat out on the water. Well, long before Red Cross, if you fell in the water and weren't pulled in pronto, you were a goner. The sea represented terror, the place of monsters and evil demons, home turf for Satan and his minions, certain death. Remember the story about the evil spirits that Jesus exorcised from the demoniac, and they jumped into a bunch of pigs who in turn jumped into the sea? Demons going home to Papa. There you go. And the image of the boat sailing over evil waters to care for needy people on the other side of the lake. The boat is the church. The church is the boat, doing its duty where evil, terror, maybe even death are very real. Where'd this story come from? Most likely it imaged the terrible persecutions that the early church in Rome endured under the iron boot terror that Rome inflicted on Roman Christians. Think Colosseum, Forum, Nero. Roman Christians remained both symbolically and actually in the boat on the sea, with waves crashing in, certain death imminent. And just where was their crucified and risen Christ, to whom they'd surrendered all? Their dying was his fate to be their fate too, death, and that's it. Jesus was in the back of the boat, asleep, which is storytelling code for dead and gone. You beginning to understand? The Christians in Rome were in the boat, and they felt abandoned because Jesus had died and he wasn't with them anymore. And they thought, yeah, great, now where are you when we need you? A lot of good you are when we need you most. Come on, you guys, row harder, look out, more water pouring in. Shark! Shark, I saw a shark! Into the wind, into the wind. The tiller's coming loose, I'll lash it down. And about that moment, They shake Jesus real hard and they yell, "Please wake up. We need you now. Please wake up, please. Don't you care about us?" And then, quoting Peggy Lee, they all sang, "Is that all there is? Come back to life, we're dying. Or is that all there is?" And at that moment, they realized their need, and he awoke, meaning up from the graves he arose again and said, "Of course I care. Of course I care very much. 1 second. Wind, waves, simmer down." And that was that for the storm. The relational storm was still blowing over the rails. "My brothers, my fathers, my sons, I have faith in you. Where's yours? Why call on me as a last resort? What am I, chopped liver, some afterthought if time and energy permit? Listen, I'm the foreman who constructed this boat. It floats. Maybe there's a leak or two here or there, but we're holding. Scared? Of course you're scared. Who wouldn't be scared?" And so our church, this church, all churches, Christianity, all religions, our nation, the whole world, we're out on the sea with a terrible storm all around us, namely COVID-19, the coronavirus. Not for one frazzling second do I think or would I suggest that the disease is some action of evil, malice, or underworld malevolence. That's cockamamie nonsense. But we are all in the same boat. And the question is whether we, as Christians, for whom this story has particular significance, or we, as world citizens, will jump ship on each other. Bail out instead of grabbing a bucket and bailing. In the need to quarantine ourselves physically from each other, will this pandemic erode us relationally one from another so thinly that they don't so much snap with a pop as fade with a whisper? Is that all there is to us? That this terrible storm across our world blows us apart and we just sort of hunker down and ride it out, meanwhile losing our connections with each other, which is to say that we lose our bearings about what is the most precious thing among us, and it's not stocks, it's not bonds, it's not investments, it's not nationalism, none of that, but the pearl of our humanity, which is care, the coin of our value, which is love, the fruit of our worth, which is justice. I love this old boat. I love this old boat of ours. She's a trusty old boat with a strong keel, a sound hull, and a sturdy tiller. God is our keel. We are the hull. Jesus Christ, or however your faith tradition articulates your bearing, is in the back of the boat, the tiller. Sometimes it may seem as if Christ is asleep, but not to worry. All we have to do is call out, "Yo, wake up. We need you again." And Jesus Christ, the tiller, will arise from among us and within us, once again, from sleep, stretch out a smile and say, that away. Let's head that away. And if we're worth our salt, in salt water and in word, we will lean to each other, the whole world. Amen.